So now that the IT stuff is solved, thanks everybody to be here. Thanks, Dr. Visu, to invite me to this forum, and I'm very happy to be able to talk on that topic under the IAT, Switchisia, and UNEP flag. It's always very important, I believe, to communicate the point of view of a company like Suez. For those who don't know us, we are the second largest environmental company in the world. We intervene in many subjects in the circular economy, on the waste side, the water side, and we are obviously extremely involved in the plastic industry. And as some of you probably know, we are even operating today a plastic recycling factory in the Bangkok vicinity. So as I'm the first speaker, I'm going to use a little bit that also to talk plastic a little bit and just to give you rough figures about where we are today. I think that plastic, it's about 400 million tons that are produced every year. And among these 400 million tons, you have about a third, about 158 million, which are packaging, plastic packaging, and which are most of the time single use. And this is definitely one of the key things when we talk about circular economy and when we talk about plastic. This is why packaging has been always one of the focus, because when you look at plastic used in other area like construction or automotive, we are in much longer cycle of production, and the impact is much less visible as it is for packaging. If you look at, I think System IQ released a report called Breaking the Plastic Waves a few months ago, and I found it very interesting. Very interesting. Why? Because it gives you a bit of a view about where we are today when it comes to plastic going into the environment and where we're going. And this is quite, the arguments are quite strong. And so to give you a bit of an idea, today we are releasing every year about 11 million tons. So out of the 400 million being produced, about 11 million tons are being leaked to the oceans. But if nothing is done, by 2040, which is 20 years from now, about 29 million metric tons will be released every year in the ocean. So looking at this, I think it's important to understand that the plastic crisis has not started yet. We are just at the beginning, and if nothing is done, we are going to be in a situation which will be even more difficult than it is today, with almost 4 times more plastic in the ocean than what we have. So it's extremely important that all the action that are being done, keep that in mind. We have to act because we are just at the beginning of having problem with plastic. But despite that, there's many things that can be done. And I think that it is very important to look at the different aspects of the industry and where efforts can be made. And you can see still from that report that we need to act in reducing our virgin consumption, in finding substitute, in recycling, in having better disposal, but also working on the mismanagement of waste. And it's basically, it's when we start to look at holistically at these old pictures that we can really achieve a real results, and that we will be able to break that plastic wave and basically definitely have a better control of the plastic in the environment. And there is several paths to achieve that. The path I'm going to talk about, which is a European path, is really related to regulation. Some other country, I think in Southeast Asia, we can see that a lot. They try to rely on market drive as well as a voluntary basis to try to achieve better results, as they don't have either the regulation in place yet, and or sometimes when they have the regulation, they don't have the power to enforce yet all what is necessary, in fact, to achieve a reduction of plastic waste in the environment and an increase of the circular economy. Others are just, let's bet on technology. I think technology will save us in the future. That might solve the problem, so we don't have to tackle it today. So you have several paths to it. Europe has chosen regulation, and it's not new. it's definitely not new. A regulation in, I would say, related to plastic waste management are started in the 90s. And it started in the 90s with the sorted collection, a very simple tool, but that was a very important enabler of recycling because, and I remember that I was a teenager at that time, and we went from one garbage bin to 3 or 4 garbage bin in the span of a few years. And it was very important because it allowed then the different waste operators, either private or public, to extract the plastic. It also is a necessary piece, is enabling the second, I think, most important regulatory brick is the EPR. Because with sorted collection, you gain a large amount of visibility, in fact, on the packaging itself, and that's enable EPR to be setting up. Some other things that have been done and that are in the process are single-use ban, for example. And you can see that since 2006 up until now, we had a large increase in the recycling rate in Europe, in the European Union. So it's vary from country to country, obviously, because every country has a little bit of their way to do. But the overall European Union recycling rate are steadily increased thanks to all this regulation. And back in 2015, the EU, and I think this is a very important step. It was a little bit in advance compared to the world in tackling this, but there really is a strategy for plastic in circular economy. And that file is available on the internet, and I will advise all the audience to have a look at it. It's a 24 pages document, very simple to read, and that explains a little bit how the European Union looked at the different issues that they were facing and how they are going to be able to increase their recycling rate from 41%, which is basically in 2017, to a target, as you can see from the table below, about 55%. In 2030. And among those, among all these different steps, I think that for me, key point and a very interesting one are the mandatory recycling content in PET bottle by 2025. I will explain to you what has been the effect of that announcement. There's also been a single-use plastic ban. So this one, I will look at it in a way that was a thoughtful single-use plastic ban. I mean, they didn't go directly saying we're going to take plastic back out of the system. I think they just looked at what was the main element that you found on the beach in Europe, what are the small elements that you can find on the beach in Europe, and how can you, with a ban, try to reduce the burden that you find in the beach. So the single-use we're talking about, in fact, are, in terms of volume, not that much, but they are going to be the cotton buds. There are going to be some, plastic sticks to get to put the balloon on. They are going to be to get some small plastic ring that you might have on bottles. So they are very targeted ban to protect to protect the ocean and what we find on the beach, which are very often small spots that are not very easy to collect. So when we look at, so European in general always have a strong regulation, and going into the detail in all the regulation will be a little bit time consuming. So I've isolated two things. So first, the first one is I want to talk about EPR. So EPR is really a subject that a lot of Southeast Asian countries are thinking about and talking about. It's been in place in Europe since the late 90s. You have a different scheme of EPR depending on the country. It can be a public EPR, it can be a private or semi-private EPR, but they all have one main goal. And the main goal of the EPR is to address the main cost of recycling, which is the feedstock cost. And thanks to EPR, you are able to reduce the feedstock cost. And this is an important point because when you look at the cost balance of recycling, mechanical recycling in that case, I'm at recycling PET or film or HDPE, you can see that thanks to an EPR system, the feedstock cost in Europe will be around 37% of your cost, while if you are doing the same in Asia with exactly the same material, you'll have a cost at 47%. And that difference is basically the EPR, which is sponsoring the collection. Another good benefit of the EPR, I mean, it's translated into this reduction of the feedstock cost, but the EPR also is helping the municipality bear with the burden of the cost of collection. So because you are sponsoring the collection, and your feedstock cost is going to be cheaper than if you don't have this EPR system. So the EPR system is a very, very important policy aspect, as it helps to reduce this cost of collection, to alleviate the burden of the collection to the municipality, and in results, it has a direct impact to the economic competitivity of any recyclable material, which is absolutely necessary for the enabling the circular economy. Because remember that when you are having recyclable material, your competition is the virgin material, and that virgin material is always indexed to the oil price, which vary quite a lot, where your collection cost is always fixed. And in times where the oil price is quite high, you might be competitive, but in time where oil price is quite low, like it is today, it is extremely hard to be competitive in recycling. And we can already see the effect. I mean, since the COVID crisis, in fact, the recycling rates have decreased because there's less people using recyclable material, despite all the talks that there were a few years ago. So EPR is an extremely important element of policy. The second element of policy I want to highlight is the mandatory content. So you've seen in the table a few slides before that by 2025, there will be a mandatory recyclable content in PET bottle. And it's the first material they are targeted. We hope they target more of it, but it's the first one they are targeting. And why? It's because what the European Union have realized is that despite the EPR system, there was only 6% use of PCR in plastic in Europe, only 6%. And the reason why was that it didn't come from the competitivity only, it came also by the fact that the customers and brand owners, they were not aware of, or they are not willing to use PCR because maybe they think the quality is not as good, or maybe they think that there's problem in production, and so on and so on. So they found out that they had to put this mandatory content to force all actors in the system to use this PCR within their PET bottle. And this had a very, very important impact, is that it enabled basically to compete with virgin material, because as I said before, you are often as a recyclable material above the virgin price, especially when it comes to very high quality material like it is on a bottle-to-bottle PET food grade basis. So in order to compete to replace this virgin material, you had to have this incentive. And this is what this mandatory content has been. And we could see very quickly, basically, the effect. And it's quite amazing. So obviously, jumping on that, a lot of the brand owners went to their own target, because they kind of realized that as the European Union was going into it, they will have to adapt. So I will say that global brand try to go even higher and try to commit use of recyclable. We have the Unilever, the Coca-Cola, but they understand that this is where it's going. So the first positive effect was to force brand owners and so on to adapt their target, taking that into account. And you can see that very quickly you had a decorrelation between the price of your recyclable PET and the price of the virgin PET. And the announcement of this mandatory content was basically in 2017. And you can see directly from 2017 this decorrelation happening, because you had a drop in the virgin price, which was linked to a drop of the oil price, while the bottle-to-bottle REPT PCR, the price remained quite the same. And it was even amplified during COVID time. And COVID time, you know, the whole price dropped quite low. The plastic price dropped quite low, but the price of this REPT PCR did not drop much. and stay at the level it was pre-COVID. And this is linked to this regulation. And this enables the recyclers to operate and not to be in difficulties. And we can see that at a direct impact, because if we look at the rPET price in places where you don't have this regulation, it had followed the virgin. If you look at the rPET price in an application which is not regulated, like textile, it has followed the virgin. So this mandatory content that allow the rPET price to remain at a level that allow recyclers to operate. And that is an important point. I think that you probably have seen in many communication in the past 6 months that the recycling, in fact, and the recycling environment was difficult, and it's difficult for every recycler in making it in Asia or in Europe. But rPET, thanks to that, has been able to operate as it's planned, and being able to do what it is necessary, what is there to do, which is basically enable the circular economy for rPET and the bottle. I talked a little bit earlier about technical breakthrough and how maybe some countries and or some environment they are focusing on getting to a technical breakthrough to solve the issue. And I think it's interesting to look at that in another way, is that in fact, I believe that regulation and technology go hand in hand. And this is definitely always the way that the European Union have looked at it. And I think that I wanted to highlight a debate that we have today on chemical recycling. It's quite a very interesting thing, is that chemical recycling is a technical breakthrough. I think everybody will agree on that. Maybe we are not there yet. Maybe there's a few years before it's reached a commercial, full reliable scale, but it's coming and it's there. But if today you do a chemical recycling plant, like a pyrolysis plant in Thailand, you'll compete with the oil price. If today you are doing the same in Europe, we'll also be competing with the oil price, because the regulation is not there to help, even if you have a breakthrough, to help categorize the value of the material that will get out of a petrochemical company that use your, what I will call here, recycled feedstock, your output from your chemical recycling plant. So one of the things that Europe is trying to look at, they're trying to look at, should we, and this is still an argument, there's still debate, so nothing is fixed, but policies start with debate. And the debate is, should we use a mass balance approach in order to enable petrochemical plants to, if you want, if they have 10% off, or if you use 10% off output from a chemical recycling plant as a recycled feedstock, instead of saying that I have a virgin that is always 90% virgin, 10% made of recycle, they can allocate that mass balance into a product in which they will have a higher recycled content. And this has pros and cons, but one of the pros is definitely that with this type of mass balance approach, you definitely have an incentive because you will be able to get a higher premium out of your recycled feedstock than that if you are just on a dilution base, in which it will be very difficult for the petrochemical company to get the premium on their product. So in order to drive the chemical recycling industry and maybe also to decorrelate it from oil price, this type of regulation is probably going to need. Another aspect which is important when we talk about regulation is also how regulation can also enable good decision. Again, chemical recycling is great, but the environmental impact is not, or probably not as beneficial as mechanical recycling. And therefore, it's important that there's also that getting into account when you look at your regulation. And don't forget that when we talk about plastic recycling, we are not only talking about preserving the ocean or the environment, we're also talking about carbon emission reduction. And as you know, you have the Paris Agreement that impose target of carbon emission reduction to Europe, and achieving circular economy and achieving 55% recycling rates is also helping the European Union to achieve this carbon emission reduction, because by each ton of plastic that you're producing with mechanical recycle, you have some carbon saving. Okay, and I think that will conclude my presentation. I think that I will, as I said, I advise you to look at the European strategy on circular economy. It's very well made. There's very important things that are put out on why they choose to go that way. And when we look at policies, you have to look at policies on the input and how to control your feedstock to enable the circular economy, as well as how to make sure that people will buy the product, which is your offtake agreement. And this is really enabled by strong regulation.